Pause for a moment and simply stay right here before you keep scrolling. Because if this message crossed your path today, it may not be quite as accidental as it appears. This was not merely another coincidence or a fleeting moment buried in your feed. Something deep inside you may have been reaching for these words, and somehow they found their way to you. So stay with me just a little while longer. I want you to bring this special person to mind right now. Let their face come into focus clearly. Then pay attention to what stirs within you when it does. That gentle tug somewhere in your chest. That blend of warmth, longing, and something that feels almost impossible to put into words. That feeling is not disorientation. It is your heart recognizing something your mind is still working to fully process. Because this person did not simply wander into your life by chance. On a deeper level, there may be something within you that already feels a sense of familiarity with them. And I understand how draining it can be to carry a love this intense when everything surrounding it feels so unsettled. All those sleepless nights spent holding these emotions quietly inside yourself, wondering whether you are imagining the signs, wondering whether any of it will matter when all is said and done. It matters far more than you have allowed yourself to believe. You are not being foolish or unrealistic. You are not being overly sensitive or theatrical. You are someone standing at the center of an experience that carries the potential to become profoundly meaningful. And that is precisely why it feels so difficult right now. What makes these kinds of connections so overwhelming is that they do not simply graze the surface of who we are. They reach directly into the places we have spent years learning to manage, conceal, or guard. Many people believe love should arrive like relief, like finally reaching still water after years of struggling just to stay above the surface. Yet the connections that truly reshape us tend to arrive more like a storm before they ever deliver peace. They shake loose everything concealed beneath old coping habits, emotional walls, pride, fear, and patterns built for survival. At first, that shaking can feel far less like progress and far more like everything is coming undone. When someone steps into your life and reaches places no one else has been able to access, your protective tendencies suddenly stop functioning the way they always have. The person who habitually gives too much begins to recognize just how exhausted they have become from constantly proving their worth and neglecting their own needs. They start wondering why they ever believed closeness had to be earned through endless patience, effort, and emotional labor. That realization carries its own kind of pain, because it forces them to confront the possibility that they were taught love was something to be earned, rather than something they were simply entitled to by existing. At that very same time, the other person may be confronting a different but equally unsettling truth. They may have moved through life by staying emotionally unavailable. Closeness became entangled with old pain, disappointment, betrayal, or loss. Their nervous system was conditioned to treat genuine intimacy as something threatening. They pull back not because the connection holds no weight, but because the feelings grow too powerful and too difficult to contain. From the outside, it may appear as though one person is pursuing while the other retreats and seems overwhelmed. Beneath the surface, however, it is frequently two wounded people responding differently to the very same fear of rejection and of not being enough. The person who pursues may believe love will slip away without constant effort, making silence feel like abandonment. Yet they must come to understand that losing themselves is too steep a price for any relationship. Their value is not measured by how much suffering they can absorb for another person. Their worth is not defined by how long they can wait, how much they can surrender, or how thoroughly they can set aside their own needs in order to hold someone near. Meanwhile, the person who withdraws often carries the opposite wound. Somewhere buried inside them is the belief that if anyone gets too close, they will eventually lose themselves, let the other person down, or become emotionally cornered. So they instinctively build distance the moment things begin to feel real. Yet that distance rarely delivers the peace they were seeking. More often, it brings guilt, confusion, a profound sense of loneliness, and a sharper awareness of how deeply they actually care. Pulling away from vulnerability may shield them from rejection temporarily, but it also keeps them from receiving the very love they quietly long for. Healing is seldom graceful in its early stages. Sometimes it resembles confusion. Sometimes it shows up as inconsistency, fear, emotional flooding, or long stretches of quiet, while someone works to understand themselves more honestly. Growth frequently looks messy, long before it begins to look like wisdom. The caterpillar quite literally dissolves within the cocoon, before emerging as something entirely transformed. Real transformation has always required some form of ending first. Not a physical death, but the ending of old identities, defenses, and beliefs that cannot survive within deeper love. That is why these connections can feel almost unbearable at certain moments. They expose the contradictions living within us. They reveal how desperately we crave closeness, while simultaneously showing us how terrified we are of it. They compel us to recognize the difference between attachment and genuine love. Attachment says, "Please do not leave me because I need you to fill what feels incomplete inside me." Genuine love eventually says, "I want to meet you fully, while also learning how to remain whole within myself." That shift changes absolutely everything. But there is a dimension of this journey that many people tend to miss. In every connection like this one, there arrives a turning point. And it rarely comes through some dramatic event or long-awaited conversation. It does not occur because they finally speak the words you have been waiting to hear. It happens because of a quiet decision you arrive at within yourself, the decision to stop endlessly waiting to be chosen and to begin genuinely choosing yourself instead. When that internal shift takes place, something within the entire dynamic begins to move. Not because love functions through magic, but because the energy we bring into a connection carries real weight. When you stop reaching towards someone from a place of fear, desperation, or need, you stop becoming something they instinctively feel compelled to move away from. For perhaps the first time, they are left alone with what they truly feel about you. Not what they fear, not what they have been avoiding, not what they have been using distraction to escape from, but what genuinely lives within them. And what lives there may never have gone away. I want you to trust something important. Everything you have moved through during this season of waiting has carried meaning. Every single moment of it. None of it has been lost. I know there are times when it feels that way. Moments when you look back at all the love you have poured out and wonder whether it simply dissolved into empty air, whether it reached anyone at all, whether any of it justified the pain. Yet love does not simply vanish. It does not dissolve into nothing. Every quiet evening spent thinking about someone who is not beside you. Every night spent drifting to sleep with unspoken feelings still resting in your heart has shaped you in ways you may not yet fully see. That love remains real. It continues to deepen you, fortify you, and widen your capacity to hold something truly extraordinary when and if it finally arrives. When you cry because something that feels so right is also causing so much hurt, that is not evidence of weakness. It is not proof that you are fragile. Those tears often reflect a heart that refuses to release something it considers genuinely meaningful. They reflect a rare kind of loyalty and emotional bravery. Many people look for reasons to step away when uncertainty grows this uncomfortable. They shield themselves before the pain can reach any deeper. It would have been simple enough to build walls around your heart. It would have been easy to persuade yourself that loving this completely was simply a liability. Yet here you are, still feeling, still caring, still holding on to hope, even in the moments when part of you is worn out. That says something significant about who you are. Not because endless waiting is always the right path, but because your capacity to love has endured circumstances that might have caused others to shut themselves away entirely. There is something genuinely remarkable about that. The truth is that real transformation frequently happens long before two people ever come together. Sometimes the greatest purpose of a connection is not immediately about union. Sometimes it is about becoming. Sometimes it is about learning self-worth, emotional steadiness, healthy limits, and the ability to stay rooted in your own value, regardless of what another person chooses. These lessons may not feel inspiring while you are living through them, but they become priceless with time, and perhaps that is what this season has been teaching you all along. Not how to pursue harder, not how to wait longer, not how to become more appealing, but how to find your way back home to yourself. How to stop measuring your value through someone else's availability. How to recognize that your heart deserves tending from you first, before it seeks it from anyone else. Because the most enduring form of love is never built upon fear. It is never sustained by anxiety, uncertainty, or emotional self-abandonment. The strongest love grows between two people who are learning how to stand on their own ground while still reaching toward one another. It grows when both people stop running from themselves. It grows when honesty becomes safer than avoidance, and vulnerability becomes more powerful than fear. No matter what unfolds from here, do not underestimate how much ground you have already covered. The person you were before this connection stepped into your life is not the same person reading these words right now. Your awareness has deepened. Your heart has grown wider. Your understanding of yourself has become richer and more layered. Even the pain has delivered something worth carrying, something that has shown you what truly matters to you. And if there is one thing worth holding on to, it is this. The love you carry should never ask you to abandon yourself in order to sustain it. The connection that is truly meant to take root in your life will not require you to become smaller, quieter, or less worthy in order to preserve it. It will invite you to step more fully into who you already are. It will encourage your growth rather than your erasure. It will welcome your authenticity rather than demand your endless striving. So as you move forward from here, carry this truth with you. Keep caring if your heart still moves you to care. Keep hoping if hope still feels honest. But do not place your entire existence on hold, waiting for certainty from someone else. Keep growing. Keep becoming. Keep choosing yourself every single day. Because the moment you genuinely do that, everything around you begins to look entirely different. And sometimes when you finally stop chasing what you fear losing, you discover that what is truly meant for you has been making its way toward you all along. Many people experience so much hurt or spend so long in waiting that they eventually grow quiet and begin sealing themselves off because the emotional toll feels far too heavy. You had every reason to make that same choice, and honestly, no one would have blamed you if you had. It would have been completely understandable. It would have made perfect sense. Yet you chose a different direction. You stayed open when closing down would have been the easier option. You remained soft when hardening yourself was readily available as the simpler path. In a world that frequently rewards emotional detachment and guarded hearts, your decision not to become closed off is not a sign of weakness. It is a remarkable kind of strength. It is a form of courage that many people never develop because they stop trusting before they ever have the chance to. To love generously without constantly calculating what you might receive in return is something genuinely rare. That quality of love becomes the very ground upon which lasting and meaningful relationships are constructed. You chose to keep feeling, keep caring, and keep your heart engaged, even when every circumstance seemed to offer a perfectly reasonable reason to turn away. That matters far more than you realize. To stand by someone through confusion, through separation, through seasons where nothing feels clear, and silence seems to go on without end. And to do so without growing bitter or resentful requires something truly extraordinary. It is not something that can be performed or faked. It cannot be learned from a page or absorbed through observation alone. It rises from somewhere deep within a person. Either you carry that capacity or you do not. And you do. That is not a minor detail about your character. It may in fact be one of the most defining qualities of who you are. And it is precisely that quality that is drawing you towards something genuine. Not toward a relationship that leaves you perpetually unsettled. Not toward a connection where you are endlessly trying to decode mixed signals and hidden meanings. You are not moving toward a future where you constantly wonder where you stand. You are not moving toward a love that keeps you forever bracing for the next wave of uncertainty. You are not headed toward a situation where your emotions feel too large for the space provided to hold them. Instead, you are moving towards something that fits, something that does not ask you to shrink or mute parts of who you are. A connection that feels natural rather than exhausting. A love that feels like finally breathing deeply after holding tension inside your chest for far too long. That is not merely a poetic image. It is a very real and attainable possibility. But it hinges on something important. It depends on what you choose to do from this moment forward. So what does that actually mean in practice? What do you do today, tomorrow, and in the days that follow? The answer is both straightforward and genuinely difficult. I am not going to make it sound simpler than it truly is. You deliberately turn your attention back toward yourself. Not as a performance, not as a tactic designed to make someone miss you, not as a way to send a message or provoke a reaction, not as a means of proving anything to anyone. You genuinely begin bringing your energy back home to where you are. You redirect the emotional investment that has been streaming outward and begin pouring some of it back into your own life. You begin asking yourself a question that perhaps you have not asked with real honesty in a very long time. What do I actually need right now? Not what do they need. Not what could I approach differently. Not what could I say to shift things. Not what would finally make them understand. Not what would bring them back. Not what would help them open up. What do you need? What would genuinely feel restorative to you today? What parts of your own life have been patiently waiting for your presence, while so much of your focus remained fixed on something uncertain and just slightly beyond reach? You begin filling those spaces. You start saying yes to yourself with at least some of the energy and enthusiasm you have been pouring into everyone else. The dreams you set aside because you were waiting for life to settle into something more certain. You begin returning to them. The experiences you put off because your heart was occupied somewhere else. You begin allowing yourself to enjoy them again. The friendships that quietly drifted into the background while your emotional energy was directed elsewhere. You begin reaching back towards some of those people. The parts of yourself that have been sitting patiently on a shelf, waiting for your attention. You bring them gently back into the light. None of this means pretending the love has disappeared. None of it asks you to deny what you feel. You do not have to force yourself to stop caring. You do not need to convince yourself that something meaningful was actually nothing. This is simply about expanding your life once more. It is about making certain your entire world is not resting on one person and one possible outcome. It is about remembering that your life is larger than any single story within it. And when you genuinely begin doing this, something quiet starts to shift. It is not dramatic. It rarely takes shape overnight. Most people do not even notice it at first, but it is absolutely real. You stop feeling like an incomplete sentence, waiting for someone else to finish it. You stop feeling as though your life is suspended in an endless waiting room. You stop believing that everything meaningful must remain on pause until one particular situation finally finds its resolution. Instead, you begin feeling whole again. You begin feeling like someone whose life carries purpose, movement, color, and significance, regardless of what any one relationship is doing. You begin feeling anchored within your own existence, rather than suspended emotionally from someone else's uncertainty. And that sense of groundedness changes the way you show up. People around you feel it, even if they cannot quite name what has shifted. There is something unmistakable about a person who genuinely feels at home within themselves. It produces a quiet kind of confidence. It creates a calm, steady strength. It generates a kind of magnetism that simply cannot be manufactured. True magnetism does not pursue, it draws others in. And the person you have been loving through all of this will notice that difference as well, likely more than anyone else around you. They will feel the shift. This is not because it is some strategy designed to engineer a particular result. It is important that you hold on to this clearly, because the very last thing you need is another technique designed to manage someone else's feelings. This is not about manipulation in any form. It is simply what naturally occurs when someone stops relating from a place of emptiness and begins relating from a place of fullness. The entire dynamic shifts. The connection breathes differently. Room opens up for something authentic to surface that could never have existed before that shift. Now there is something else that deserves your understanding. They are not the villain in this story. I know there have likely been moments when the pain made it tempting to cast them in that role. Moments when the silence, inconsistency, distance, or confusion made it far simpler to create a narrative where one person was clearly right and the other was clearly wrong. But people are rarely that uncomplicated. They are not cold-hearted. They are not indifferent to you. What you have been reading as distance is often something far more layered. Many people learned, long before they ever crossed your path, that love was a risky thing. Somewhere in their past, closeness became associated with pain, disappointment, loss, or emotional overwhelm. Love came to feel costly, uncertain, something that demanded more than they believed they had available to give. They did not arrive at that belief deliberately. No one does. It becomes woven into a person through experiences that shape them long before they possess the language to explain what is happening. It becomes part of the way they move through the world to keep themselves safe. So what reads as withdrawal is often someone managing a fear that has been part of them for years. They think about you in the quiet spaces between distractions. In those moments where there is no longer any noise to drown out what they genuinely feel, you are there. They sense your absence even during periods when they were the ones who introduced that distance. There is something unresolved inside them when it comes to you, something that does not simply fade because contact has grown less frequent, because what they feel is not really about physical proximity. It is connected to something deeper that they have not yet fully worked through, and that unfinished work is not yours to carry. You cannot do it in their place. No matter how clearly you can see what they need, no matter how much love you have ready to offer, no matter how powerfully you want to help guide them through it, that journey belongs entirely to them. The most powerful thing available to you is refusing to allow their fears to define your value, refusing to absorb their unresolved wounds as though they are evidence that something within you is lacking. Their struggle belongs to them. Their healing belongs to them, and your worth remains fully intact, regardless of where they currently stand on that journey. Carry yourself with genuine dignity and such consistent self-respect that when they finally move through whatever has been holding them in place, what they encounter is you at your very finest. Not worn down by waiting, not hollowed out by longing, not still searching for validation that should have been yours all along. Instead, they find someone standing firmly and quietly in their own light, grounded, whole, and truly prepared for what comes next. Close your eyes for just a moment and picture a morning that may be nearer than you currently believe. You wake up, and the first thing you become aware of is that the weight has lifted. That particular heaviness that has lived in your chest for so long you nearly forgot it was there. That steady pressure, that persistent ache just beneath the surface, has dissolved. Not because your feelings disappeared, not because you stopped caring about this person, not because you forced yourself into emotional withdrawal or talked yourself out of loving. None of that happened. The weight is gone because the love has finally found somewhere it belongs. Because what once felt unresolved has at last found its resolution. Because the thing that always seemed to live somewhere ahead of you has finally arrived. It is no longer something you are reaching toward. It has simply become part of your daily reality. Imagine turning toward this person and truly seeing them, really taking in their face and noticing something present there that was either never there before or has been absent for a very long time. You no longer see hesitation. You no longer see internal conflict concealed behind their gaze. You no longer see that familiar expression of someone who is physically present while holding part of themselves carefully in reserve. Instead, you see peace. Not a sweeping or dramatic kind of peace. A quiet, settled peace. The kind that belongs to someone who has made a full and complete choice and is no longer revisiting it. Someone who is no longer managing their emotions from a careful distance, not holding something back, not keeping one foot positioned toward the exit, simply someone who is entirely present with you. Imagine what it would feel like to experience a love that no longer visits your thoughts at 2 a.m. as a source of dread. A love that does not keep you awake, turning conversations over in your mind, searching for hidden meanings, wondering what you overlooked, or questioning what you might have handled differently. Imagine a love where your nervous system finally receives permission to settle. A love where you are not continuously watching for signals. A love where you are not bracing quietly for disappointment. A love where uncertainty is no longer a silent companion sitting beside you every single day. Imagine what it feels like when the question of whether you are enough simply ceases to exist. Not because you spent years persuading someone of your worth, not because you finally demonstrated your value, but because you are sharing your life with someone who never once questioned it. Someone who sees you fully. The parts of you that are polished and self-assured. The parts that are complicated and still finding their footing. The pieces you carry proudly and the pieces you are still learning to make peace with. Every layer of who you are, and they choose all of it. Not in spite of those parts, but because of them. That vision is not some fantasy constructed to carry you through the difficult days. It is not wishful thinking dressed up as hope. It is the natural destination of two people who each committed themselves to their own healing. Two people who stopped arriving carrying old wounds and expecting the other person to repair everything life had broken. Two people who accepted responsibility for their own growth. Two people who invested enough time in knowing themselves, understanding themselves, and healing themselves that when they finally came together, they were genuinely available for something real and lasting. That is what is quietly being built right now. Within the uncertainty, within the waiting, within the moments that feel tangled, within the difficult stretches where progress seems entirely invisible. Every day you choose to tend to yourself rather than dissolve into fear. You place another piece into the foundation of a love that lasts. Every time you choose stillness over panic, self-respect over self-abandonment, and growth over obsession, you reinforce that foundation. Do not allow the difficulty of this middle chapter to convince you that the destination is not real. The middle is almost always the hardest part. It is the stage where nothing feels certain yet. The stage where the end cannot be clearly seen. The stage where people most often question whether they have the strength to keep going at all.